abandoned, pregnant, and on the brink of despair. Angela Sinclair's world turned upside down the day her husband, millionaire Richard Sinclair, walked out the door without warning. In a swirl of high-stakes betrayal, hidden agendas, and ruthless legal battles, Angela found the resolve to fight back for herself and the child she carried. What happened next would shake New York's elite to its core, exposing secrets, unveiling alliances, and pitting a scorned wife against her powerful husband and his cunning mistress. Will Angela triumph against overwhelming odds, or will the glitz and glamour of wealth bury her story forever? Stay tuned for a jaw-dropping tale of heartbreak and revenge that you simply can't ignore. Angela Sinclair was born. Angela Moreno, a bright-eyed dreamer from a humble neighborhood in Queens. Her parents, Juan and Maria Moreno, were first-generation immigrants who worked tirelessly to give their children better opportunities. Angela's upbringing was strict, yet loving, instilling in her an unwavering resilience and a conviction that hard work could transform destiny. She possessed an innate optimism that shone through even in the darkest times. Little did she know how much she would rely on that resilience when her life took a devastating turn. Richard Sinclair was the kind of man people read about in Forbes or saw on the covers of business magazines, tall, impeccably dressed with a charismatic smile that could melt ice. He hailed from a wealthy family in Boston, but he made his own millions in real estate development in Manhattan, revitalizing old buildings into modern luxury complexes. A self-styled mogul, Richard had a reputation for flamboyance, throwing lavish parties in penthouse suites and driving the latest sports cars down Fifth Avenue. They met at a charity gala for the American Cancer Society, a prestigious event at the Plaza Hotel. Angela had been there with a close friend, Alyssa Carter, whose father served on the charity's board. Angela's simple black dress stood out among a sea of designer gowns, and Richard, bored by the usual crowd of Manhattan socialites, noticed her sincerity and unassuming beauty. Their conversation flowed with surprising ease. Angela shared how she was earning her master's degree in sociology at NYU, while Richard spoke about his philanthropic endeavors, scholarship funds, and community projects. Or so he claimed. Their courtship was swift. Dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants in Tribeca, invitations to exclusive art openings at MoMA weekend, getaways to the Hamptons. Richard spared no expense to win Angela over, though she was initially dazzled by the lifestyle. She also found much to admire in his ambition. He seemed thoughtful at times, earnest in his desire to make a meaningful impact. Of course, the tabloids loved the pairing. Beauty from Queens dates, real estate prints. Despite the publicity and the whirlwind pace, Angela believed that behind the public glamour, Richard was a caring man with genuine warmth. After a year of dating, Richard proposed in a spectacular gesture on the rooftop of his newest luxury condo project overlooking Central Park, accompanied by a string quartet and a lavish fireworks display. Angela, overwhelmed by emotion and his apparent devotion, said yes. A grand wedding followed at St. Patrick's Cathedral, with a reception at the iconic Rainbow Room. The guest list included CEOs, politicians, and celebrities, including rumored appearances by some high-profile figures, such as design mogul Tommy Hilfiger and real estate tycoon Sam Zell. Angela's parents were both awed and proud, despite feeling like fish out of water in such rarefied company. Looking back, Angela often wondered if the glamour of Richard's world blinded her to ominous warning signs. There were rumors about his past relationships, whispers of infidelity, or unscrupulous business dealings. But Angela brushed them aside, insisting she trusted him. Now, as she sat alone in a silent mansion, questioning every decision that led her here. She regretted not paying closer attention. The day her dream turned into a nightmare began with a phone call, one that would lead her to discover a deep betrayal that shook the foundation of her marriage and her faith in Richard. Emily Rutherford née Thompson had always been the type of woman people trusted instinctively. There was a steadiness in her gaze, a calm in her voice, and a warmth in her smile that could melt even the most hardened of hearts. Michael met her during their sophomore year at the University of California, Berkeley. He had been rushing across campus, late for a lecture, when he collided with her outside the economics building. Her books spilled everywhere. He bent down to help her, apologizing profusely. She laughed, brushing a strand of chestnut hair from her face, and said, "Only if you promise to explain Chapter 6 to me afterward." That was the beginning. While Michael studied business and economics with relentless ambition, Emily majored in communications and minored in sociology. She had a natural talent for understanding people, reading between the lines, knowing when to speak and when silence said more. From the beginning, she supported Michael's dreams with unwavering belief. He talked of building empires, changing the world, and she believed him, not because he promised wealth, but because of the fire in his eyes. When he spoke of the future, in the early years, things weren't glamorous. Their first apartment was a cramped studio with peeling paint and a leaky faucet. They ate instant noodles more often than not, and Emily picked up extra shifts at the campus bookstore and a local bakery just to help cover Michael's startup expenses. There were nights when Michael stayed up working until dawn, and Emily sat beside him with flashcards helping him prep for pitches and networking events. When Rutherford Ventures finally gained traction, it felt like the world had cracked open with possibility. The day Michael closed his first multi-million-dollar deal, he came home, lifted Emily off the floor, and spun her around in the living room shouting, "We did it." They married shortly after graduation in an ethereal ceremony at a vineyard in Napa Valley. The wedding was everything they'd dreamed of. Ivory table linens, twinkling fairy lights strung across rows of grapevines, laughter echoing beneath the golden California sun. Michael vowed to protect her, to build a life worthy of her sacrifice and loyalty. Emily vowed to never let success change the essence of who they were together. Years passed, and their lives transformed dramatically. Emily became the quiet force behind Michael's empire. She didn't attend board meetings or appear in business magazines, but she hosted elegant dinner parties, remembered every investor's spouse's name, and charmed even the most stoic clients. Behind the scenes, she was Michael's mirror, reflecting his best intentions and gently curbing his worst impulses. They moved into a mansion in Pacific Heights, 4 stories of glass, steel, and modern opulence. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the bay, and the master suite had a fireplace balcony and walk-in closet the size of their old apartment. A vacation home in Lake Tahoe followed. Then came the yacht, the private chef, and designer wardrobes. Emily smiled through it all, though sometimes she missed the days when Michael would fall asleep, mid-sentence beside her. Not because of exhaustion, but because he simply wanted to stay close. She never complained about the solitude that crept in slowly over the years. Michael's empire demanded time, and she understood. He traveled often. New York, London, Singapore. Emily filled her days with charity work, home design projects, and mentoring younger women from underprivileged communities, helping them navigate careers in corporate communications. She had everything society claimed should make a woman happy. Yet sometimes she caught herself staring out the window, too long wondering when exactly the laughter had faded from their home. She noticed the changes in Michael gradually. It began with him staying later at the office, taking more calls during dinner, and responding to texts with vague, distracted nods. His laughter became rarer, and when he smiled, it no longer reached his eyes. He was becoming a man she barely recognized, driven restless and increasingly secretive. Emily wasn't naive. She'd seen how men in power behaved. Several of Michael's peers had traded their wives for younger models, claiming they'd simply grown apart. Emily always hated that phrase. It felt like an excuse for people too cowardly to fight for what they'd built. She'd promised herself they would be different. She and Michael had been through too much, had built too much to ever throw it away for novelty. But something was wrong. He no longer asked about her day. He barely touched her at night. There were nights she found herself alone in their vast bed, wondering if she had become invisible. She tried to ignore the flickers of doubt. She told herself he was stressed, that the pressures of leading a multi-billion-dollar firm weighed on him, that this was just a phase. Then came the night she found him in the guest bedroom at 2 a.m., whispering into his phone. When she stepped into the doorway, he jumped. His explanation was thin. Something about a call with Tokyo. Emily didn't question him outright. She simply watched the way his fingers tightened around the phone and the way his eyes refused to meet hers. Her heart began to fracture. Still she tried. She cooked his favorite meals, suggested weekend getaways, left notes in his suitcase when he traveled, but his responses were lukewarm. He was polite, he thanked her, but she could feel the growing chasm between them, vast and silent. She confided in Lucy Marshall, her best friend since college. Lucy had seen too many of their friends' marriages implode and didn't mince words. "He's cheating," Lucy said, flatly swirling her wine. "I've seen this play before." Emily shook her head. "No, Michael wouldn't." "Wouldn't what?" "Be human. Be tempted." Lucy challenged. "You've been loyal, Emily. But loyalty doesn't guarantee reciprocity. You need to protect yourself." Emily wanted to believe otherwise. She clung to the memories of the boy who carried her books, who cried with joy when they bought their first house, who once told her, "I don't care about the money. I care about building a life with you." But the man in their bed now no longer whispered those things. Late one night, Emily stood on the balcony of their master suite, wrapped in a cashmere robe, the cold biting at her skin. Below, the city sparkled with life, cars, lights, laughter. Her eyes stung with tears she didn't want to shed. She wasn't crying just for Michael. She was mourning the version of herself who had believed love was enough. In her heart, Emily knew a storm was coming. She didn't know how or when it would strike, but she sensed it with a clarity that cut through the fog of her denial. The loyal wife had stood by quietly for too long. Now she would have to decide who she was without him, and whether she had the strength to face the truth when it finally revealed itself. The day Angela's suspicions transformed into cold, hard truth started like any other. She woke up early, prepared breakfast. French toast, fresh strawberries and coffee, exactly the way Richard liked it. But he barely touched his plate before rushing out, muttering something about an important business meeting downtown. She stood on the balcony overlooking the bustle of Fifth Avenue, trying to ignore the ominous feeling in her gut. Late that afternoon, Angela was preparing for a charity auction they were scheduled to attend when a courier arrived at the penthouse. He handed her a small, discreetly wrapped envelope, assuming it was another event invitation. Angela opened it without much thought. Inside, she found photographs grainy, yet explicit enough to see Richard intimately embracing a woman with dark hair and a striking figure. Her hands shook as she flipped through more photos that showcased the two leaving a hotel holding hands and even sharing a passionate kiss by a private elevator. A note accompanied the pictures. "Your husband is cheating on you. He's been doing it for months. Ask him about the Ormond Hotel." There was no signature. The letters were typed, giving no clue about who sent them. Angela's mind reeled. Her heart pounding in her chest. She felt betrayed, humiliated, and ashamed that someone else knew about this before she did, or at least had the audacity to present it to her like a sinister gift. She clutched the envelope, waiting in the living room, until dusk. Richard finally returned, distractedly loosening his tie and glancing at the mail on the table. When she confronted him with the photos, his face went pale, then quickly hardened. He snatched them from her hand, feigning outrage. "Where did you get these? They're fake. Someone is trying to blackmail me." His protestations sounded rehearsed. Angela demanded to know who the woman was. At first, he tried to deny everything, claiming the pictures were altered. Angela's tears and fury mounted. "Look me in the eyes and tell me you haven't been sleeping with her," she demanded, voice trembling. She showed him the hotel receipt from Ormond. Hotel that had accidentally slipped out from one of the pictures. His name, her name, one suite paid in full, with his credit card. Hard to deny. In a sudden switch, Richard dropped his act. He hurled the photos on the table. "Fine, her name is Christina Baxter." He spat. "She's someone I've been seeing, but it's not what you think." Angela's world shattered. Every detail of her life with Richard, every memory, every promise felt like a cruel farce. She could barely breathe through the heartbreak. "How could you do this? How could you lie to me?" she cried. Richard tried to close the distance between them, but she recoiled. "Angela, listen, I can explain." "It's complicated. I never intended for it to get this far." She slapped him. The sound echoed in the cavernous penthouse. "Get out," she commanded, tears streaming down her cheeks. She insisted he leave before she completely lost whatever composure remained. Richard stormed out, leaving Angela alone with only the cold comfort of her shattered reality. Little did he know that this moment, his final exit that evening, would be the first step in Angela's journey to take him down in a way he never anticipated. The following weeks were a haze of heartbreak and confusion. Angela avoided the tabloids, but she could not escape the persistent paparazzi outside her building, nor the swirl of rumors among Manhattan's elite. Friends from high society gatherings offered her half-hearted sympathies, thinly veiled gossip sessions disguised as concern. Angela realized how isolated she'd become in this new life. How few genuine friends she had. Alyssa Carter, her longtime confidant, remained her rock, but Alyssa was frequently out of town. Angela's parents, Maria and Juan, were worried sick. They wanted her to come home, but she resisted clinging to some faint hope of salvaging her marriage. During this tumultuous period, Angela discovered she was pregnant. The realization came one morning when she felt dizzy, nearly fainting in the bathroom. A slew of symptoms: nausea, extreme fatigue. Emotional swings led her to take a test. When the result read positive, a mix of fear and excitement warred within her. After the initial shock, she felt an unexpected surge of love for the life growing inside her. This baby was her flesh and blood, entirely innocent, and she vowed to protect it at all costs. Yet the pregnancy weighed on her heart with new anxieties. Richard was the father. How would he react? Would he dismiss the pregnancy as a trap, an inconvenience? Or in some faint corner of her imagination, Did she still hope it might bring him back? The swirl of questions was overwhelming. She resolved to inform Richard, hoping against all logic that it might shift his perspective. When Angela finally gathered the courage to call, the line went to voicemail. Several attempts later, she received a curt text. "I'm in a meeting. We'll talk when I'm free." Days passed without a word. Each night she tossed and turned, feeling the gravity of her predicament. She was pregnant alone and losing faith in everything that once anchored her. In desperation, Angela reached out to Richard's mother, Evelyn Sinclair. Evelyn was a formidable woman, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and fiercely protective of the Sinclair name. Perhaps she could reason with her son. When Angela finally got through, Evelyn maintained a frosty politeness. "I'm sorry to hear about this situation, Angela. However, Richard is a grown man. I'm sure he'll do the right thing." The words rang hollow. Days turned into weeks. Angela found herself pacing the penthouse, which felt eerily silent. The staff had mostly left, some dismissed by Richard, others resigned out of uncertainty about the household's future. Bills still arrived, but she had limited access to the finances. Much of the money was tied up in trusts or business accounts under Richard's name. She had credit cards, but Richard had cut them off. Alone, pregnant, and financially cornered, Angela felt abandoned. A phone call from an old friend provided a flicker of hope. Marcus Whitmore, a lawyer she'd met during a pro bono project at NYU, offered his help. When she explained her predicament, Marcus didn't hesitate. "Angela, you have rights. He can't just leave you without support." For the first time in weeks, she sensed a glimmer of empowerment. Perhaps with Marcus's guidance, she could confront Richard properly, not just for herself, but for the child she carried. Christina Baxter was not new to the game of social climbing. She came from a working-class neighborhood in Queens, not far from Angela's old stomping grounds, though their paths had never crossed. By her early 20s, Christina had reinvented herself, changing her accent, grooming her appearance, and learning the ins and outs of Manhattan's elite circles. She started as a club promoter, then became the face of upscale events, ingratiating herself with wealthy men. Over time, she learned the power of seduction, charm, and strategic networking. Richard first encountered Christina at a charity runway show, one of those extravagant events he attended to maintain a philanthropic facade. Christina was modeling a designer's new line and managed to catch Richard's eye. Later that night, she boldly approached him, sliding a cocktail napkin across the bar with her phone number scrawled in smooth cursive. From that moment, their dalliance began. Christina was meticulous in her approach. She knew Richard was married, but that only fueled her ambition. When she discovered the extent of his fortune, she engineered ways to appear indispensable. She would accidentally show up at the same galas, feigning surprise. She did research on his business interests, impressing him with her feigned knowledge of real estate development. Soon she became his confidant, offering emotional support whenever he complained about stress, often painting Angela as a wife who didn't understand his business demands. The affair escalated quickly, fueled by Richard's arrogance and Christina's calculated pursuit. They met in luxury hotels, ate at secluded Michelin-starred restaurants in Greenwich Village, and even jetted off to Miami under the guise of business trips. Christina took notes every step of the way. She saved receipts, recorded voice notes, and photographed moments that proved their involvement. Evidence she stored in a secure cloud folder. In her mind, if Richard ever tried to cast her aside, she would have ammunition to protect her newfound lifestyle. When Angela discovered the affair, Christina knew it was only a matter of time before the situation blew up. While Richard scrambled to maintain damage control, Christina began planting seeds of her own narrative. She confided in a few strategic friends, some of them reality TV hopefuls, others social media influencers, drop-feeding them tidbits about how Richard had led her on and promised to leave his wife. She played the role of the victim, ensuring that if the story went public, it wouldn't paint her as a mere home-wrecker, but as someone misled by a powerful man. Behind the scenes, Christina had ambitions that stretched beyond being an affair partner. She wanted financial security, possibly a ring on her finger, or at least a significant settlement. She saw Angela as an obstacle, someone whose presence in Richard's life prevented him from fully giving in to Christina's demands. The pregnancy, if Christina knew about it, would be an even bigger threat to her plans. While Angela was struggling with heartbreak and an uncertain future, Christina was methodically tightening her grip on Richard, playing to his vanity and fear. If he wanted to keep her from spilling secrets, he would need to keep her satisfied. Little did Christina realize Angela was no longer the naive wife she once was. A collision course was set, and both women were determined not to be the one left empty-handed. Confiding in lawyer Marcus Whitmore was Angela's first smart move. Marcus had a sharp legal mind and an empathetic streak that set him apart from the high-powered, cutthroat attorneys of Richard's world. He carefully reviewed Angela's marriage documents, including the prenuptial agreement. The prenup had been Richard's idea, orchestrated by his family's legal team before the wedding. At the time, Angela had felt she had nothing to hide or fear. She trusted Richard. Now that same document loomed as a potential barrier to her financial security and her unborn child's well-being. Yet Marcus found some interesting angles. For one, Angela had significantly compromised her own education and career opportunities at Richard's request. This factor, coupled with the pregnancy, could be powerful in challenging parts of the prenup, especially under New York state law. Marcus explained, judges aren't fond of punishing a spouse who's been sidelined from their own prospects, especially when a child is involved. With Marcus's counsel, Angela began meticulously documenting everything. She tracked expenses she could no longer pay due to Richard freezing their joint accounts, recorded the times he ignored her calls about the pregnancy, and even saved text messages where he made veiled threats. Marcus assured her these details would be invaluable should they need to litigate. Aside from legal help, Angela found unexpected support from her NYU professors. When she emailed her old academic advisor, Dr. Rebecca Nguyen, about her situation, Dr. Nguyen offered words of encouragement and an open door to return to the program whenever she could. While it didn't solve her immediate crisis, the reassurance reminded Angela she had her own life path, one that didn't solely revolve around Richard's whims. Her parents, Juan and Maria, remained her emotional anchors. Though they lived in a modest row home in Queens, far from the marble floors of the Sinclair penthouse, their home was a sanctuary of warmth and unconditional love. Angela would drop by, and Maria would cook her comforting meals while gently rubbing her back, telling her in Spanish, "Mija, you will find your strength." Juan, a proud man who rarely showed vulnerability, quietly handed her a small envelope of his own savings, insisting she take care of herself and the baby. Angela, moved to tears, declined, but her father pressed it into her hands, unwavering in his insistence. Angela also had her friend, Alyssa Carter, who had connections in philanthropic circles. Though Alyssa was often traveling, she pulled strings to get Angela invited to exclusive seminars and workshops on female entrepreneurship. Perhaps ironically, these events were typically attended by women seeking investments from the likes of Richard Sinclair, but Angela saw them as opportunities to build her own network. She met potential mentors, philanthropic leaders like Diana Weinstein, who ran a non-profit assisting women in crisis situations. Even a quick chat here or there opened the possibility of forging new alliances outside of her crumbling marriage. The more Angela gathered support, the clearer her mission became. She would not crumble under Richard's betrayal. Instead, she would secure her future, and that of her babies, with Marcus preparing the groundwork and a renewed sense of purpose. Angela took the first confident steps toward a battle she never dreamed she'd have to fight. While Angela quietly strategized, Richard sank deeper into a maze of deception. Eager to preserve his public image, he worked overtime in the media to paint himself as a misunderstood husband in a complicated marriage. Public relations teams churned out press releases about his commitment to philanthropy and ongoing efforts to support charities. He staged photo ops at children's hospitals and homeless shelters, trying to overshadow the gossip swirling about him and Christina behind the scenes. However, Richard was becoming unhinged. The real estate market was shifting. A few of his luxury developments, stalled financing got tighter, and new competition emerged in prime Manhattan locations. Investors demanded transparency, and some started raising eyebrows about his personal controversies. Questions rose. Was he reliable? Was his marriage scandal hinting at deeper professional instability? Richard tried to appease Christina to keep her from stirring more drama. He rented a penthouse suite at the prestigious Ventara Towers, discreetly putting it in her name. He spoiled her with expensive jewelry from Cartier, hoping the gifts would buy her silence and loyalty. Christina, sensing an opportunity, pushed for more. She wanted to be seen as an integral part of his life, not just a secret fling. She pressed him to consider divorcing Angela more aggressively, or at least making a public statement about their separation. Meanwhile, Richard dodged Angela's attempts to discuss the pregnancy. On a rare phone call he answered, he dismissed her news. "I can't handle this right now," he said tersely. "We'll talk when things settle." Angela's repeated pleas for financial assistance went ignored. He assumed she was too timid to act without his goodwill, underestimating both her resolve and Marcus's legal prowess. At the same time, Richard employed his mother's family lawyer, a formidable figure named Malcolm Birnbaum, to draft a restrictive postnup agreement. The document intended to limit Angela's claims in the event of a divorce, especially any spousal support beyond a minimal monthly allowance. Richard's plan was simple corner. Angela financially wearing her down until she agreed to terms favorable to him. He never once considered that Angela would stand her ground, let alone gather the means to fight back on equal footing. In an increasingly paranoid state, Richard also leaned on private investigators to watch Angela. He wanted to ensure she wasn't meeting with lawyers or journalists who could further tarnish his name. The investigation revealed Angela's frequent visits to a legal office in Midtown alarmed. Richard confronted her at their penthouse one evening, banging on the door like a man possessed. Angela opened it cautiously. The confrontation that followed was heated. "You dare involve attorneys behind my back," he snarled. Angela, trembling but steadfast, held her ground. "I gave you every opportunity to do the right thing, Richard. You left me no choice." He stormed off, threatening to drag her through a public fight. She couldn't win. "I'll bury you and your so-called lawyer," he spat. But the look in Angela's eyes told him something had changed. She wasn't the timid housewife anymore. A reckoning was coming, and for once, Richard felt a flicker of apprehension he couldn't entirely dismiss. Angela's life was a whirlwind of doctor's appointments and legal consultations. Her OB/GYN doctor, Catherine Lee, confirmed that despite the stress, her pregnancy was progressing normally. Minimize anxiety. Dr. Lee advised, gently, knowing full well how impossible that seemed, given Angela's marital crisis. Each ultrasound became a refuge of joy, a reminder that something precious was waiting at the end of this painful journey. One particularly rainy afternoon, Angela received a phone call from a blocked number. She hesitated, but answered. A woman's voice whispered urgently, "We have a common enemy, Richard Sinclair. Meet me at Café Lumière tomorrow at noon." Before Angela could ask a single question, the line went dead. Curiosity battled caution, but Angela decided to go. The next day, she stepped into the cozy cafe and scanned the room. In a corner booth sat a woman in dark sunglasses, sipping tea. She beckoned Angela over. Removing the glasses, the woman introduced herself as Ava Heaton, a former employee of one of Richard's real estate holding companies. Ava claimed she had proof of financial misdeeds, embezzlement, fraudulent contracts, and inflated valuations that could bring Richard's empire down. She said she was fired unjustly, shorted on severance, and threatened with legal action if she went public. Angela listened, her heart pounding. Ava pushed a folder across the table. Inside were spreadsheets, email correspondence, and financial statements showing suspicious transactions. "I'm risking a lot by giving you this," Ava confessed. "But I can't let him ruin any more lives." Though overwhelmed, Angela recognized the power of this information. If Richard was committing fraud, it could compromise any settlement Angela was entitled to. Moreover, it could jeopardize the legacy and trust funds for her baby. But stepping into this territory was dangerous. She asked Ava why she didn't go to the authorities directly. "Richard's lawyers would bury me," Ava explained, eyes glinting with anger. "They'd drag my name through the mud, claim I stole data. I need someone with a legitimate reason to use this evidence, someone who won't be easily dismissed. That's you." Angela felt a mixture of dread and determination. This was bigger than just spousal support or child custody. If what Ava revealed was true, it could land Richard in prison or at least force him into a corner where he'd have to negotiate. Angela reached for her phone, snapping photos of each document, her hands shaking. She thanked Ava and promised to keep her identity confidential for now. That night, Angela met with Marcus and laid out the folder. As he pored over the documents, his professional composure cracked into surprise. "This is damning. If it holds up, Richard is in serious trouble. But be prepared for backlash. He'll fight tooth and nail to protect himself." For Angela, the evidence represented a turning point. No longer was she just a forsaken wife seeking justice. Now she had leverage, real leverage, to hold Richard accountable for every wrongdoing, with her unborn child's future at stake. Angela steeled herself. She would not back down no matter what storm Richard tried to unleash. The decision to proceed with legal action solidified when Angela realized Richard had stopped paying the penthouse mortgage and utilities. She received eviction notices and panicked phone calls from property managers. With nowhere else to turn, she packed her belongings and moved in with her parents, determined to spare herself the humiliation of being thrown onto the street. Marcus wasted no time filing a lawsuit, seeking both divorce and substantial alimony, child support, and damages for emotional distress. He also initiated a separate investigation into Richard's business dealings, forwarding some of Ava Heaton's documents to trusted financial analysts who could corroborate their authenticity. While criminal charges were not within Angela's direct power to file the evidence, could be turned over to the district attorney if needed. Word spread fast in Manhattan's social and legal circles. Suddenly, Angela was no longer the quiet, jilted spouse. She was a formidable adversary, armed with claims that threatened Richard's carefully curated image. Gossip columns churned out stories speculating about Richard's alleged embezzlement, while social media was abuzz with commentary on the sensational case. In the midst of the frenzy, Christina Baxter tried to salvage her own position. She clung to Richard, pushing for public reassurance of their relationship, or at least a financial arrangement that ensured her future. But Richard was under immense pressure from multiple fronts: investors, lawyers, the press. He no longer had the bandwidth to placate Christina, which made her increasingly restless. She started dropping hints in online fashion forums and gossip sites, implying she had her own trove of damaging information if she wasn't treated fairly. Still, she stopped short of betraying Richard, outright calculating that her best move was to see how the court drama played out. Angela's pregnancy advanced. She was in her second trimester, beginning to show. Despite the chaos, she discovered a surprising inner peace whenever she felt the baby flutter. Her mother's home became a refuge. She helped Maria cook meals, watch telenovelas in the evenings, and occasionally tried to distract herself with crocheting baby blankets. During these quieter moments, a growing determination fueled her. She wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her child's right to a secure future. Marcus scheduled a meeting with Richard's legal team to discuss the possibility of an out-of-court settlement. The day of the meeting, Angela and Marcus walked into a high-rise conference room overlooking Central Park. Richard, flanked by Malcolm Birnbaum and two junior associates, barely looked at Angela. His face was taut, jaw clenched. The tension in the room was palpable. Birnbaum opened with a dismissive tone, offering a paltry settlement. "We believe Mrs. Sinclair is entitled to a modest monthly allowance. Given the short duration of the marriage and the prenuptial agreement, Angela felt her blood boil." Marcus smiled thinly and slid copies of key financial records across the sleek table. "We also have reason to believe that Mr. Sinclair engaged in fraudulent activities," Marcus said, his voice measured. "This evidence can be introduced in court if no fair agreement is reached." Richard's eyes flashed with alarm. He shot a glare at Angela. The meeting ended in a stalemate, but Angela could see the cracks. For the first time, Richard appeared genuinely uneasy. The road to court was set, and both sides were gearing up for a showdown with massive consequences. The trial commenced on a crisp morning at the New York Supreme Court. A throng of reporters and curious onlookers gathered outside cameras, flashing as Angela, with her baby bump visible beneath a tailored maternity dress, made her way through the crowd. Richard arrived separately, a scowl plastered on his face. His expensive suit and aloof demeanor only reinforced the distance between them. Inside the wood-paneled courtroom, Judge Catherine Friedman presided. An experienced jurist known for her no-nonsense approach, Friedman was unimpressed by high-profile theatrics. She immediately laid ground rules cautioning both parties that outbursts and media manipulation would be met with stern consequences. Marcus opened Angela's case with a measured emotional appeal. He described her sacrifices for the marriage, leaving her master's program, giving up her own aspirations, and the emotional toll inflicted by Richard's affair and subsequent abandonment. Evidence of Richard's refusal to acknowledge the pregnancy or provide support was laid out, including text messages, phone call logs, and anecdotal testimony from Angela's mother, Maria, who described Angela's distress in heartbreaking detail. Richard's legal team countered with a narrative portraying Angela as an opportunist. They argued that she benefited from the lavish lifestyle and was now trying to cash in further. Malcolm Birnbaum insisted that any wrongdoing on Richard's part was a personal failing, separate from his obligations under the prenuptial agreement, which Angela had signed willingly. Then came the curveball financial records Marcus presented, spreadsheets detailing suspicious wire transfers and shell companies tied to Richard's developments. One of the star witnesses was Ava Heaton, who testified about her experiences within Richard's company, how she'd been asked to falsify documents and then fired when she refused. She recounted internal emails from Richard referencing creative accounting, which was code for illegal funneling of funds. The gallery buzzed with surprise. On cross-examination, Birnbaum tried to discredit Ava, painting her as a disgruntled ex-employee, but Ava held her composure, referencing Times dates and direct quotes. Judge Friedman allowed the evidence into the record, though she made no immediate ruling on the validity of the allegations, stating she would consider them in conjunction with further expert testimony. As the day progressed, Christina Baxter was called to the stand by Angela's team, an unexpected twist that sent murmurs through the courtroom. She arrived wearing designer attire, looking more like she was attending a fashion premiere than a legal proceeding. Her testimony was guarded, but under oath she admitted to the affair and revealed that Richard had promised her financial security if she kept their relationship discreet. While she tried to downplay her motivations, cross-examination painted her as complicit in hiding funds. She clammed up, refusing to provide further detail about offshore accounts or hush money she may have received, claiming she didn't recall. The tension in the courtroom peaked when Richard took the stand. Barely meeting Angela's gaze, he tried to justify his actions, chalking up the affair to a moment of weakness. He disparaged the financial allegations as a smear campaign, accusing Angela of colluding with a bitter ex-employee, but his bravado cracked under Marcus's pointed questions and the mountain of documented evidence. By the end of the first week, the public narrative shifted dramatically. The once untouchable real estate mogul was no longer seen as a misunderstood husband. Evidence of corporate malfeasance, combined with his callous treatment of a pregnant wife, painted a far darker picture. The stage was set for a bombshell verdict, one that could change Angela's life forever. Tensions soared as the trial reached its midpoint. Judge Friedman allowed both parties to present additional witnesses and finalize depositions. Courtroom gossip suggested Richard was scrambling to contain new revelations, including potential witness statements from disgruntled investors who had lost money in his stalled developments. Moreover, it became apparent that the district attorney's office was paying close attention to the proceedings, especially the financial data exposed by Angela's team. The biggest twist came when an anonymous tip was delivered to Marcus's office containing a flash drive with more damning correspondence between Richard and key executives in his organization. The emails explicitly discussed forging contractual documents and concealing losses from shareholders. The tipster turned out to be none other than one of Richard's junior associates, who had grown uneasy with the lies and found a way to leak the files. When Marcus submitted the drive as evidence, Birnbaum exploded in protest, claiming it was unverified and illegally obtained. Judge Friedman allowed a forensic review, and the digital fingerprints confirmed the emails were authentic. During a recess, Richard approached Angela in the corridor, a desperation in his eyes she had never seen before. "Angela," he began quietly, "let's talk. We can settle this without dragging each other through more mud." He proposed a substantial payout, enough for Angela to live comfortably and raise their child on the condition that she withdraw the lawsuit and make no further mention of criminal allegations. For a brief second, Angela felt the old pang of love for the man she had once married, but she remembered the months of abandonment, the cruelty and the unborn child he had so callously ignored. Too late, she replied, her voice resolute. "I trusted you once. That's never happening again." She turned away, leaving Richard to seethe in silent frustration. Christina Baxter's actions also threw a wrench into the case. Afraid of becoming a scapegoat, She privately reached out to Marcus, offering more incriminating information in exchange for immunity from any potential legal fallout. Through this, Angela's team uncovered that Christina had personally facilitated the creation of shell companies at Richard's behest, receiving a sizable commission. The mistress, who once reveled in her victory over Angela, was now an inadvertent ally. Christina's defection triggered chaos in Richard's camp, undermining his credibility even further. As proceedings neared conclusion, the media labeled the case as the Sinclair scandal. Major outlets like the New York Times and CNN covered the trial, dissecting every revelation. Online people rallied behind Angela as a symbol of resilience against privileged men who thought they were above the law. In a final act of cunning, Birnbaum tried to claim Angela was meddling with crucial evidence, an accusation that fell apart under scrutiny. Judge Friedman dismissed the motion, reiterating that the financial records and witness testimonies were sufficiently vetted. Sensing the tide of the trial, Birnbaum filed motions to postpone hearings, hoping to buy time. But Friedman was firm, pressing both sides to expedite. Ultimately, it became clear that Richard was cornered. The illusions he had crafted were shattered, replaced by an avalanche of facts and testimonies pointing toward his guilt both in his marriage and his business dealings. His attempts to shift blame onto Angela or Christina simply didn't resonate. With the final hearing looming, all that remained was the judge's decision, a verdict that would either vindicate Angela's fight for justice or send her back to the margins of a broken dream. The final day of the trial was a spectacle. Every seat in the courtroom was filled, and the overflow crowd congregated in the hall, straining to catch fragments of the proceedings. Angela arrived early, feeling her baby move gently in her womb, a reassuring reminder of why she fought so hard. Richard walked in, pale, his confident stride reduced to a stiff shuffle. Judge Friedman began by addressing the divorce and financial settlement. She stated plainly that Richard, by ignoring his pregnant wife and cutting off financial resources, had violated the spirit of support inherent in marriage. The judge invalidated key sections of the prenuptial agreement, citing the grossly imbalanced circumstances under which Angela was left. The courtroom sat in silence as Friedman awarded Angela a substantial monthly spousal support and child support package. Additionally, Friedman granted Angela a sizable portion of Richard's assets, ensuring not only the baby's welfare, but also Angela's long-term stability. Yet the drama didn't end there. Friedman also addressed the allegations of financial malfeasance. While the divorce court couldn't hand down criminal penalties, the judge noted that enough evidence had surfaced to warrant further investigation by prosecutors. She strongly recommended the case be forwarded to the district attorney's office, stating, "The court cannot ignore evidence of widespread fraud. This matter demands a thorough legal review by the appropriate authorities." A hush fell over the room. Angela glanced at Marcus, relief flooding her. They had done it. They hadn't just secured financial justice. They had exposed a web of deceit that could no longer be hidden. Richard's expression was a mix of disbelief and impotent rage. Christina, seated behind Richard's legal team, looked visibly shaken. Her dreams of living as a millionaire's companion were crumbling before her eyes. As Friedman finished reading her judgment, gavel slamming on the wooden desk, the flurry of reporters rose to unleash questions. Angela's name rang out in a cacophony of voices, but she kept her head high, guided by Marcus and Alyssa as they navigated the camera-laden exit. Outside, Angela hesitated briefly, turning to face the crowd. She took a breath, then calmly stated, "I hope my story helps others understand. You can stand up for yourself, no matter how powerful the opposition seems." Then she continued on her way, ignoring the further torrent of inquiries. The next few weeks were a blur. Angela moved into a modest but comfortable apartment on the Upper West Side. Arranged through the settlement's immediate disbursement, she resumed her studies at NYU, determined to complete her master's degree before the baby arrived. Meanwhile, Richard's empire began to collapse under the weight of investor lawsuits and the looming criminal investigation. Christina Baxter attempted to vanish from the public eye, but rumors suggested she was also under scrutiny for her involvement. Through it all, Angela felt a renewed sense of purpose. She woke each morning aware of her growing belly. Her future brightened by the knowledge that she had not only survived, but overcome betrayal of the highest order. In time, she believed she would find closure. For now, she savored the sweet taste of victory, buoyed by the promise she made to protect her child at all costs. In the months that followed the trial, Angela's life slowly fell into a new, more peaceful rhythm. The tabloids eventually found other scandals to chase, and Angela was able to reclaim a measure of anonymity. She dedicated herself to finishing her sociology degree, diving into research projects centered on family law and socio-economic disparities, a subject now deeply personal to her. She wrote papers on how legal systems often fail marginalized spouses when wealthy partners exploit prenuptial agreements. Professors praised her for turning her life experience into academic insight that could help others. Her pregnancy progressed, and with each milestone, hearing the baby's heartbeat, the first flutter of a kick, Angela felt a profound sense of gratitude. Her mother accompanied her to Lamar's classes, and her father, while initially awkward about the idea of childbirth, proudly showed off ultrasound photos to his co-workers at the construction site. It became a family affair, grounded in warmth and genuine love. Meanwhile, Richard's fall from grace was both swift and public. Investigations led to criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement, and multiple lawsuits hammered the once glamorous Sinclair real estate empire. Despite attempts to negotiate plea deals, the evidence was simply too damning. Christina Baxter was subpoenaed, and the last Angela heard, Christina had turned state's witness in exchange for leniency. The woman who had once lauded her affair over Angela now sang a different tune in front of prosecutors. Periodically, Angela wondered if Richard felt remorse, not just for betraying her, but for risking the stability of their unborn child. His minimal attempts at contact came through stiff legal channels, yet Angela refused to let bitterness shape her future. With the help of therapy, she learned to separate the heartbreak from her sense of self-worth. She resolved that her child would know they were conceived in love. Whatever chaos followed was on Richard, not on them. Finally, on a bright, brisk morning in late spring, Angela gave birth to a baby boy. Mateo Sinclair, Moreno, Marcus, and Alyssa visited the hospital, bearing gifts and wide smiles. Angela's parents wept joyfully, marveling at their tiny grandson. The moment Angela held Mateo, she felt an indescribable wave of fulfillment. In that instant, every hardship, every tear shed in her darkest hours, felt like stepping stones leading to this precious miracle. A few weeks later, comfortably settled back in her apartment, Angela sat in a rocking chair with Mateo asleep in her arms. She gazed out the window at the Manhattan skyline. The city she once found intimidating was now just a place like any other, a tapestry of triumph and tragedy. She felt neither hatred nor regret, only a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, and a daunting legal battle. In the end, she emerged stronger, forging a new path for herself and her son. As she softly hummed a lullaby, Angela realized that life's storms often pave the way for new beginnings. She had proven to herself and to the world that even a millionaire's abandoned wife could rise from the ashes stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for joining us on this tumultuous journey through heartbreak, scandal, and ultimate triumph. Angela Sinclair's determination and courage remind us that no matter how powerful the opposition, justice can prevail when we fight for our rights and refuse to be silenced. If you found yourself moved by Angela's story, her grit in the face of betrayal, her relentless pursuit of truth, and her unwavering love for her unborn child, then please show your support. Call to action. Let us know you appreciate compelling stories of resilience and justice. Share, spread Angela's remarkable journey to inspire those who may be facing their own battles. Subscribe, stay tuned for more dramatic, real-life inspired stories that showcase the human spirit's ability to overcome even the darkest obstacles. Hit the notification bell and be the first to witness more stories of courage and hope. He was the dashing mogul every ambitious entrepreneur wanted to emulate. She was the poised, loyal wife who had stood by him from humble beginnings. No one would have guessed that behind the gated mansion's manicured lawns, betrayal festered like poison. Until one day, in a flurry of financial sabotage, he let his mistress cut off his wife's credit cards. It was humiliating, scandalous, and only the beginning of a whirlwind that would pit powerful business alliances against each other. In a boardroom confrontation that stunned everyone, the CEO himself stepped in, but not in the way anyone expected. Buckle up. This is the story of love, greed, and revenge. Jordan Alberts was not born into luxury. He grew up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Milwaukee, where he learned to hustle by selling candy bars door to door at the age of 10. Over the years, Jordan's unwavering determination and charm propelled him into better circles. First at a local startup, then into his own tech company that caught the eye of an angel investor. By the time he was 35, Jordan was a self-made millionaire, a prominent figure on various entrepreneurial boards, and had connections with people like Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, and a few top executives at Google. His wife, Elizabeth Alberts née Wagner, had been with him through everything. They met in college at a small tech entrepreneur club meeting, both bright-eyed and dreaming of changing the world. Elizabeth came from a modest background, too. Her father was a retired auto mechanic, and her mother a homemaker. She'd studied communications with an emphasis on public relations, and it was through Elizabeth's network of contacts that Jordan first gained access to small local pitch events. While Jordan pitched his innovative software for automating small business tasks, Elizabeth made calls, arranged coffee meetups, and tried to capture the interest of potential backers. They married in a little chapel by Lake Michigan. It wasn't a lavish wedding, no star-studded guest list, no fancy reception at the Ritz. But to Jordan and Elizabeth, it felt perfect. A union built on genuine love, unwavering support, and a shared dream of building a life and a business empire together. Over the next decade, they grew from a modest condominium in Milwaukee to a stunning estate in Austin near Lake Travis, with a sweeping view of the water and rolling Texas hills. It was there at a philanthropic event organized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that Jordan's name landed on the radar of top-level investors. His company's smart automation technology was recognized for its potential to transform not just small businesses, but large-scale manufacturing and logistics. Soon after, Jordan's net worth skyrocketed from a mere $5 million to well over $200 million. For a while, everything was picture perfect. The marriage was strong, their personal synergy unwavering. Elizabeth handled some philanthropic duties, organizing events, acting as a goodwill ambassador for Jordan's brand, and forging new partnerships through her PR background. Their household staff adored them, describing Elizabeth as kind, gracious, and always mindful of the people around her. But money can be a seductive force, and success can open doors to darker temptations. Jordan began attending more exclusive networking events in Beverly Hills, New York, and beyond. Elizabeth was often at his side, but there were times she couldn't attend. Perhaps she was busy finalizing the details for a charity gala, or maybe she was simply burnt out from the unrelenting schedule. It was during these times, rare at first, then increasingly common, that Jordan got close to someone else. Her name was Ava Monroe. She was a rising star in the world of technology law, representing high-profile clients like Tesla, Amazon, and a few top-tier cryptocurrency exchanges. She had a reputation for being ruthless in negotiations, seductive in social gatherings, and unbelievably charming behind closed doors. The rumor mill started buzzing the moment Ava was seen at Jordan's table during a private dinner after a tech summit in Las Vegas. Elizabeth wasn't there. She had chosen to stay in Austin, meeting with a team of female entrepreneurs Jordan was mentoring. A few people whispered about Jordan's visible fascination with Ava, the way he leaned in whenever she spoke, how they clinked champagne flutes with an intimacy that suggested more than just business talk. No one knew for certain how fast or how deep it went, but soon the signs became undeniable. Lavish gifts appeared on Ava's social media, including a diamond bracelet, suspiciously similar to the ones Jordan's company had once gifted important clients. Photos emerged of Jordan and Ava at high-end restaurants in Manhattan, always carefully angled to obscure Jordan's face, though keen observers could still identify him by the sliver of a recognizable watch or the faint reflection in a mirrored wall. By the time the rumors reached Elizabeth, they were no longer rumors, but near-confirmed facts. She felt her chest tighten, her world spinning out of control. This couldn't be real. Jordan had always been a loyal partner. But the evidence was too compelling to deny. She confronted him in the privacy of their Lakeview mansion. At first, Jordan denied everything. Yet denial quickly turned into a half-hearted admission once Elizabeth presented him with photographic evidence. Like a skilled negotiator used to controlling deals, Jordan tried to manipulate the situation, insisting that Ava was just a business associate, someone he occasionally had dinner with. But Elizabeth saw right through it. She had always been adept at reading him. A chill settled over their once loving home. Elizabeth, determined to preserve her dignity, demanded they enter marriage counseling, or at the very least step away from high-profile events until they resolved their issues in private. Jordan nodded, providing non-committal answers. He had never liked therapy, never seen the point in discussing feelings with a stranger. He agreed to her wishes on the surface, yet beneath the facade, he continued his involvement with Ava, allowing the illicit relationship to take root. This was the calm before the storm. For soon Elizabeth's sense of betrayal would pale in comparison to the massive financial and emotional blow about to come her way. Weeks passed. Elizabeth tried to focus on her philanthropic work and personal projects, attempting to distract herself from the growing chasm between her and Jordan. When a local charity she sponsored invited her to discuss future donations, Elizabeth discovered something shocking. Her personal credit card was declined. Embarrassment washed over her in front of the unsuspecting staff. She tried another card. Sure, it must have been a glitch, but that too was declined. The staff politely suggested she call her bank, and Elizabeth excused herself with a polite smile, her hands trembling as she left the office. Elizabeth called the bank suspecting fraud or an administrative error. But the bank's representative informed her that both cards had been cancelled the previous week. Under their joint account, they were tied to Jordan's finances, and evidently Jordan had authorized the cancellation. It felt like a punch to the gut. Why on earth would Jordan cancel her cards without her knowledge or consent? They had never had major financial disputes. Elizabeth always had access to family funds, albeit responsibly. She dialed Jordan, but the call went straight to voicemail. She sent him several frantic texts. No response. Later that evening, Jordan came home exuding an air of tired disinterest. Elizabeth confronted him the moment he walked through the door. Under the chandelier's glow, which reflected in her tear-filled eyes, Jordan brushed aside her questions with a dismissive wave. "I needed to consolidate our finances," he said, removing his blazer. "You can use the joint checking account for a while." "No big deal, no big deal." Elizabeth's frustration swelled. "You cancelled my credit cards without even telling me what's going on. Are you punishing me for something?" Jordan's eyes flicked away nervously, and that was when Elizabeth realized he was lying again. The next words that came from his mouth were not only shocking, but also laced with a cruelty she never imagined he was capable of. "Ava suggested we revisit some of my expenses. She found that you were spending frivolously. It made sense to limit credit usage." Elizabeth's heart dropped to her stomach. Ava. That woman was now meddling in their finances. As if the affair wasn't enough, Jordan had allowed this mistress to encroach into an arena that Elizabeth believed was sacred, her own household stability. "What is Ava doing reviewing my spending? Since when does your fling get to decide what is or isn't frivolous?" Elizabeth spat tears, threatening to spill. Jordan made an attempt at a calming gesture, but his words only fanned the flames. "She's helping me restructure. Her firm has great insights into corporate finances. This is about the business, Elizabeth. It's not personal." Not personal. Elizabeth recalled how intimately personal their marriage had always been. They built every aspect of their lives together, from small decisions about wallpaper colors to big entrepreneurial leaps that demanded everything from both of them. Now Jordan was shutting her out, consulting Ava instead. In a quavering voice, Elizabeth demanded, "Reinstate my cards. I am your wife. I have a right to our finances, and you know I've never been irresponsible with money." Jordan's face hardened with a new arrogance. "Not until we finalize our restructure," he said, referring to some nebulous plan Elizabeth knew little about. "I'll handle everything in the meantime." That moment, that cold exchange, was a harbinger of the bigger heartbreak to come. If Jordan was letting Ava control such details, what other aspects of their marriage was he willing to let her sabotage? As the days turned into weeks, Elizabeth discovered one more blow after another. The monthly allowance she used to cover household expenses had been slashed without explanation. The staff, including her personal assistant, was laid off. Bills began piling up, addressed to her name, but with no means to pay them aside from groveling at Jordan's feet. Friends and family started to notice. Elizabeth tried to hide her shame. She confided in her sister Caroline, who was enraged at Jordan. "This is financial abuse," Caroline insisted. "You should speak to a lawyer." Elizabeth shuddered at the thought. She still believed they could salvage their relationship, that Jordan would snap out of whatever daze Ava had put him in. Yet a small part of her whispered that maybe Caroline was right. Then came a fateful meeting at a hotel conference suite in Los Angeles, one that Jordan had insisted Elizabeth attend. It was a gathering of major tech moguls, including Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who were rumored to be there to discuss new tech innovations in global logistics. When Elizabeth arrived, she quickly realized something was off. She saw Jordan in the lounge area, standing far too close to Ava, exchanging hushed conversations. Seeing Elizabeth from a distance, Jordan slipped away discreetly, leaving Ava behind. Elizabeth approached her husband with a forced smile. "I'm here," she said, desperate to maintain composure. "What's the plan?" Jordan gave a curt nod. "There's a closed-door session for the key players only. You'll have to wait outside." In the past, Elizabeth had always been included in these key player sessions as Jordan's partner and PR advisor. The subtle exclusion burned her pride. She swallowed her anger. "Sure, I can wait." After hours of waiting, she found Jordan and Ava laughing together near the bar. As she approached, Jordan's phone buzzed, and he stepped away. That was when Ava turned a chilling smirk on her face. "You know Jordan's a visionary," Ava said, swirling the wine in her glass. "He needs someone who can keep up with him on all levels: business, ambition, excitement." Elizabeth felt her face flush with anger. "I've been by his side for years. We built this together." Ava gave a theatrical shrug. "Maybe in the past. But times change. People evolve. I guess you were too comfortable." Elizabeth clenched her fists, biting back a retort. She was determined not to make a scene in front of such influential people. But oh, how she wanted to lash out, to expose Ava for the home wrecker she was. Ava flicked her hair behind her shoulder, noticing Elizabeth's agitation. "Things will be better if you accept it," she cooed, as if offering advice to a friend. Jordan's moved on in more ways than one. The finances are just the beginning. Elizabeth's body went cold. She realized in that moment how truly precarious her situation was. Ava was not simply a fling. She was positioning herself as a partner in Jordan's professional and personal life. The credit cards were just one step in what looked like a systematic campaign to push Elizabeth out of everything she and Jordan had built. Still, Elizabeth refused to crumble. She left the event quietly, but her mind churned with rage and heartbreak. It was time for her to take action. She needed to protect herself, her assets, and her dignity. Little did she know that as she plotted her next move, Jordan and Ava were preparing a financial ambush that would push her to the brink. Only fate and an unexpected intervention by a certain CEO would alter the course of their twisted game. In the days after the Los Angeles conference, Elizabeth attempted to consult with attorneys. She picked up a referral from a friend who once worked with a high-profile divorce lawyer in New York. The initial phone calls were sobering, with Jordan's empire being primarily under his name and her credit cards cancelled. She had limited liquidity to hire top-tier representation. Even so, Elizabeth pressed forward. She managed to scrape together some funds from a personal savings account. Jordan had no access to money she had set aside from her early PR consulting days. It wasn't a large sum, but enough to secure a preliminary consultation. During that consultation, her lawyer, Michelle Liu, a bright and empathetic but hard-hitting attorney based in Houston, laid out the hard truth. Financial abuse and infidelity are serious grounds for divorce, Michelle said, scanning through Elizabeth's financial statements. But if Jordan's funneling money and assets into new accounts under his own name, or shifting resources to places you can't see, we need proof, and we need it fast. Elizabeth swallowed. She recounted Ava's involvement, how she was effectively orchestrating the restructuring. Michelle's pen scribbled quickly over a notepad. "You have a right to half of the marital assets, Elizabeth, but it looks like your husband is 2 steps ahead. We must move quickly." The plan was to gather evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing and file a court order to freeze marital assets, ensuring Elizabeth had a fair shot. But as they began drafting documents and rummaging through what records Elizabeth had, an avalanche of shocking details surfaced. Jordan wasn't merely cancelling credit cards. He was transferring stocks from their joint portfolio into an account under his newly formed trust. He had changed the authorized signatory details for a few of their properties, effectively locking Elizabeth out. He was also taking out lines of credit against certain properties, presumably to fund new ventures that, as Elizabeth suspected, involved Ava. The emotional strain weighed heavily on Elizabeth. She couldn't sleep, her appetite waned. Each day felt like standing at the center of a storm. Yet if she thought this was the worst of it, she was mistaken. One evening, after finalizing some documents with Michelle, Elizabeth returned to her mansion to find her key card didn't work on the electronic locks. Pounding on the door, she shouted for the live-in staff if any were left. Seconds later, the door opened slightly, revealing Ava's face. "Jordan's not here," Ava said icily. "You should call next time." Elizabeth's heart hammered. "This is my home. Get out of my way," she demanded, trying to push past. But Ava slid in front of her, refusing to budge. "He told me you're not welcome here anymore until the legal mess is settled," Ava sneered. "I have every right to ask you to leave." Elizabeth was trembling with fury. "You have no rights here. You're the mistress, not the wife." With a cold laugh, Ava stepped aside and pointed at Elizabeth's luggage haphazardly placed in the foyer. "Jordan left these for you," she said. "He said to pack whatever else you need and let security escort you out if you refuse to leave." Elizabeth blinked away tears, her throat raw with outrage. She was being thrown out of her own home by the woman who had intruded into her marriage. That moment was a cruel epiphany. Jordan had not only cut off her finances, but now he was physically pushing her out of the place she had shared with him for years. Yet in all that darkness, a sliver of light emerged the next morning. Elizabeth received a phone call from a close mutual friend, Marcus O'Donnell, who worked with Jordan at a large tech conglomerate in Dallas. Marcus was someone Elizabeth trusted, an executive who had known Jordan since the early days. He had seen them build the company from the ground up. Elizabeth Marcus said, his tone urgent. "I don't know everything that's going on, but I heard from your staff that you've been locked out. There's a board meeting next week. Jordan wants to finalize some big decisions. If you can get to that meeting and talk to the chairman, maybe you can find some leverage." Elizabeth's breath caught in her chest. The chairman of this particular conglomerate was none other than famed CEO David Hartridge, known not just for his visionary leadership, but also for a strict code of ethics. Over the years, Hartridge had invested heavily in Jordan's business. He was the reason Jordan sat on that board. "He's not the type to meddle in personal affairs," Marcus warned. "But if Jordan's pulling stunts that compromise your share in the company, Hartridge might step in. He's big on fairness and hates scandal." It was the glimmer of hope Elizabeth needed. She thanked Marcus profusely. The plan was simple: attend the board meeting, confront Jordan in front of Hartridge, and present enough evidence of Jordan's wrongdoing to ensure the board and possibly the entire conglomerate would not stand for it. She spent the week gathering documents, bank statements, and text message screenshots that implicated Jordan in unscrupulous financial moves. Michelle Liu helped compile everything into a neat folder. "You need to be prepared for Jordan to lash out," Michelle warned. "He'll try to discredit you in front of the board." Elizabeth nodded her determination, overshadowing her fear. She practiced her speech, reciting it in the mirror of her modest hotel room, where she had temporarily moved. Heart pounding, she told herself that if there was ever a time to fight, it was now. Finally, The day of the board meeting arrived. Elizabeth dressed in a sleek black pantsuit that radiated confidence. She walked into the corporate skyscraper in downtown Dallas, her chin held high despite the knot in her stomach. She spotted Jordan in the corridor, flanked by Ava, and a couple of the board members. As soon as he saw Elizabeth, his expression darkened. "You're not supposed to be here," Jordan said, trying to keep his voice low. Elizabeth raised her chin. "I'm still an investor in your company. I hold shares. So yes, I'm attending the board meeting." Ava stepped in with a condescending smile. "Don't make a scene, Elizabeth. This meeting is for serious stakeholders." "I am a serious stakeholder," Elizabeth retorted, voice steady. "I'm your wife, still legally, and I'm half of this empire's foundation." Behind them, a tall figure approached CEO David Hartridge himself, a man in his 50s with graying temples and a firm handshake. He regarded Elizabeth with polite curiosity. "Ms. Alberts, I presume?" Elizabeth nodded, handing over her invitation papers and a letter from her attorney, which stated that she possessed partial shares. Hartridge studied the documents, then gave a curt nod indicating she was allowed to attend. Jordan shot Elizabeth a glare that spoke volumes. You have no idea what you're getting into. But Elizabeth did. She was here to preserve her dignity, her livelihood, and the legacy she had helped build. The meeting commenced in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Dallas skyline. The board members sat around a large mahogany table, exchanging pleasantries about the upcoming quarter's projections. Jordan made a short presentation on a new partnership with a logistics firm, highlighting expansions and new contracts. A few board members clapped. Then came time for open discussion. Elizabeth raised her hand, clearing her throat. "I'd like to address some concerns about the financial structuring Jordan is proposing." She began, her voice reverberating across the silent room. Jordan's face reddened. Ava, seated beside him, tried to intervene. "We should keep personal matters out of board discussions," she said. But Elizabeth pressed on, raising the folder of evidence. "These changes aren't just personal," Elizabeth said. "They could affect company stability. Jordan is funneling resources into a new trust, making questionable decisions without transparency. I have documents signed by him with references to Ms. Ava Monroe, demonstrating a conflict of interest that could potentially compromise investor trust." A hush fell over the room. Hartridge's brow creased. "Jordan, is this true?" Jordan stood, scrambling for composure. "This is a personal matter. Elizabeth is overstepping her bounds." "She's not," Hartridge replied, his voice sharp. "If there's a conflict of interest that threatens the stability of our partnership, it's very much a board matter." Jordan's eyes darted between Hartridge and Elizabeth. For the first time, he seemed cornered, uncertain how to proceed. Ava shot Elizabeth a lethal glare, realizing that Elizabeth's boldness had forced the topic into official territory. The tension was palpable. Elizabeth's heart thumped so loudly, she was certain everyone could hear it. But she stood her ground. Continuing. "I also discovered lines of credit being taken against marital properties to fund expansions. These expansions could be legitimate, but the details are obscured. I have reason to believe Ms. Monroe is manipulating these finances for her personal gain." Murmurs rippled through the board. A couple members exchanged uneasy glances. Even those who might have sided with Jordan seemed rattled by the magnitude of Elizabeth's accusations. Hartridge steepled his fingers, evaluating the situation. "I propose we recess for 15 minutes. Jordan, Elizabeth, Ms. Monroe, please step into my office." Jordan inhaled frustration etched across his features. But he couldn't refuse the CEO's request, not without causing a catastrophic scene. The three followed Hartridge into a glass-walled corner office, shutting the door behind them. In that tense, enclosed space, the real battle began. Elizabeth laid out her evidence on the polished table before Hartridge. Jordan tried to dismiss it all as a personal dispute, but Hartridge was no fool. He could see the potential for scandal, especially if a partner was using company infrastructure for personal vendettas. Throughout this heated exchange, Ava attempted to deflect blame. She portrayed herself as a legal advisor, merely suggesting financial moves, disclaiming any wrongdoing. But Elizabeth's carefully compiled documents suggested otherwise. Emails, text messages, and proposed legal documents bore Ava's digital fingerprints. Hartridge's expression darkened. "Jordan, this is unacceptable. If these documents are authentic, you've put your personal entanglements ahead of corporate responsibility. I won't allow it under my leadership." Jordan's face went pale. He tried to protest, to label Elizabeth's claims as overblown, but Hartridge had already made up his mind. "Until this is sorted out, Jordan, I'm placing your proposals on hold. We can't move forward with any major financial changes if they're under this sort of ethical cloud." Elizabeth felt a surge of relief, a faint vindication. While she hadn't resolved the core issue of Jordan's betrayal, at least the board wasn't letting him run roughshod over her financial future. But Jordan, cornered and embarrassed, lashed out in desperation. "You can't shut me down like this," he snapped at Hartridge, voice tight with anger. "I'm the one who made that original deal with your conglomerate. You need my innovation." Hartridge stood up, bristling at Jordan's tone. "I'm the CEO, and you've just made me question your reliability and integrity. Watch yourself, Jordan." Ava stepped closer to Jordan, placing a hand on his arm to calm him, but he shrugged her off. "You'll regret this," he warned Hartridge. Then turned to Elizabeth. "And you made a fool of me in front of everyone." Elizabeth clenched her fists, refusing to cower. "You did that to yourself," she said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. Jordan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Ava followed quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Hartridge sighed, looking at Elizabeth, who was holding back tears. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Hartridge said. "I'm sorry about your personal struggles, but I have to protect the board's interests. If you need anything, contact my office. I'm not a family court judge, but I won't let Jordan drag the company down." With that, Elizabeth let out a shaky breath. She had achieved a small but crucial victory, yet she couldn't shake the nagging sense that Jordan, humiliated and cornered, was far from finished. She left the skyscraper, stepping out into the bright Dallas sun, uncertain, but determined. Little did she know this chapter was only the start of a far more explosive confrontation, one that would involve security teams, sudden betrayals, and a twist that would bring Jordan himself to his knees. Life outside the mansion was lonely, but Elizabeth was thankful for the reprieve from Ava's manipulations. She rented a small apartment near downtown Austin and used what funds she had left to secure her basic needs, while Michelle continued to press for a financial freeze on Jordan's assets. In the weeks following the tense board meeting, Jordan went surprisingly quiet. No more legal letters arrived. No more credit lines were sabotaged. He didn't attempt to contact Elizabeth, nor did Ava. Instead, it seemed as though they had retreated into some silent fortress, likely strategizing their next move. Elizabeth took advantage of the lull. She reconnected with old friends and mentors, explaining partially at least what she was going through. While many were shocked, They offered support in the form of references, moral encouragement, and occasional leads for a stable job or a business partnership. Despite the heartbreak, Elizabeth discovered a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a passive bystander in Jordan's world. She had her own capabilities, her own strengths. Slowly, she started consulting for small tech firms, using her communications and PR background to help them craft compelling pitches. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work that reminded her she could stand on her own 2 feet. Then one evening, she received a phone call from an unknown number. A crisp, professional voice greeted her. "Hello, Elizabeth. This is Patricia Carlson. I'm an executive assistant at Tesla, working under Elon Musk's leadership team." Elizabeth's heart thudded. She had met Patricia briefly at a tech conference in Berlin 2 years ago, but they'd never exchanged more than pleasantries. "How can I help you?" Elizabeth asked, mind racing. Patricia hesitated. "I might have information relevant to your predicament with Jordan. Let's just say some of our legal divisions have been observing Ava Monroe for a while, and some red flags have come up." Red flags. Elizabeth's curiosity flared. "You're investigating her?" A slow exhale from the other end. "Our major concern is that she's potentially engaged in insider trading, or at least something that veers close to it. She's been known to manipulate powerful men to gain inside info on deals, especially around new technologies. We don't have direct evidence, but we do know that she's heavily involved in your husband's finances. We suspect she might be siphoning resources for her own agendas." Elizabeth's mind reeled. This was bigger than a domestic spat. Ava might be leveraging Jordan's resources and connections to stake her own claims in the tech world. That explained the sudden shifts in finances, the new trust accounts, and the lines of credit. Patricia continued. "We want to bring her down, but we need more information. You, Elizabeth, might be in a unique position to gather that." Elizabeth tapped her fingers on the kitchen counter. "Isn't that something your legal team handles?" A rueful laugh. "Yes, but we need Jordan's direct involvement. We suspect he's unwittingly giving her access to confidential materials through corporate crossovers or joint ventures. If you can help us prove it, we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, protect Tesla's proprietary data, and help you gain leverage in your divorce." Elizabeth considered the offer. It was risky. If Ava was truly up to something illegal, Elizabeth could expose herself to potential backlash, but the lure of finally getting the upper hand was strong. "I'll do what I can," Elizabeth replied cautiously. "But how do I communicate with you about this?" Patricia gave her a secure email address and instructions on how to encrypt files. "And one more thing," Patricia said, before hanging up. "People like Ava are cunning. She'll anticipate your every move. Don't trust phone lines or any device that Jordan has access to. Be careful." Elizabeth thanked her and ended the call. Adrenaline coursing through her. For the next few days, she scoured her digital archives for anything that might hint at insider information. Jordan's old messages about collaborations with major tech companies like Tesla or Amazon, documents that Ava might have manipulated anything that showed a trail of questionable activity. She found a few suspicious threads, forwarded emails from Jordan's corporate account that were CC'd to Ava's personal address. Attachments relating to Tesla's Project Next Gen battery were among them, though none of this was strictly proof of wrongdoing yet. Elizabeth compiled what she could and sent them to the secure email Patricia provided. In response, Patricia confirmed that these were valuable leads, but incomplete. "Keep digging," she urged, and let me know if you get direct evidence of deals or monetary gains tied to these inside details." Meanwhile, Michelle Elizabeth's lawyer was preparing for a preliminary hearing to freeze some of Jordan's assets. She insisted Elizabeth come to court to testify about the financial abuse and the suspicious activities they had uncovered. But Jordan's side surprised them by agreeing to a partial freeze without argument. "That's strange," Michelle said, tapping a pen against the conference table. "Why would he agree so easily?" Elizabeth shrugged, perplexed. "Maybe he realizes fighting me will look bad in front of the board." But Michelle wasn't convinced. "I suspect he's preparing a bigger move. Be vigilant. He may have more leverage than we know." The next morning, Elizabeth received an unsolicited text from Jordan. "We need to talk, face to face." She felt a swirl of conflicting emotions: anger, sorrow, curiosity. But she knew she had to tread carefully. She agreed to meet him in a public place, a cafe near the courthouse, where she could keep the upper hand. When Jordan arrived, he looked tired, as though the weight of his troubles had worn him down. He offered a half smile, which Elizabeth did not return. "Liz," he began using the old nickname he once uttered, with affection. Things got out of hand. She crossed her arms. "You think—" He sighed, scanning her face for warmth that was no longer there. "I want to settle this amicably. We can discuss spousal support, property divisions, everything. No need for a long, nasty court battle." Elizabeth let the silence hover. She wasn't naive enough to believe him at face value. "Amicably? Are you telling me Ava is out of the picture?" Jordan's shoulders tensed. "This is about you and me, not her. Look, maybe I got carried away with Ava's advice. She's a brilliant attorney." "She's manipulative," Elizabeth cut in sharply. He brushed the point aside. "Regardless, I'm willing to compromise, but I need you to lay off this insider trading nonsense. It's reckless. You're endangering my reputation." Elizabeth realized then that Jordan knew she'd been snooping into his communications. Perhaps Tesla's legal inquiries had begun reverberating in his circle. She saw the fear in his eyes. He was worried, if not about losing her, then about losing his empire. "You made me the enemy," Elizabeth replied, in a hushed, trembling tone. "When you let your mistress cut off my cards and throw me out of my home." Jordan looked away, shame flickering on his face. "I didn't handle that well. But you have to understand the pressure I'm under with these deals." She waited, letting him squirm. Then he continued. "You'll get a fair share. I promise. I just need you to stop meddling in my professional affairs, especially with Tesla or any other major collaborators. You'll ruin me if you do." A bitter laugh escaped Elizabeth. She thought of all the times she had stood beside him, protecting him, representing him before powerful players, forging alliances that were crucial to his success. Now he was pleading for her, not to ruin him. The irony nearly choked her. Before she could respond, Jordan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and muttered a soft curse. "I have to go," he said, throwing some cash on the table for their untouched coffees. Elizabeth watched him leave, a mixture of pity and disdain swirling in her stomach. It was obvious he was desperate, but was this a genuine attempt at reconciliation, or a ploy to keep her from uncovering more incriminating information about Ava? That question lingered as she returned to her apartment, drained. However, a new email from Patricia waited in her inbox. It contained an attachment, a partial timeline of suspicious trades linked to accounts rumored to be controlled by Ava Monroe. There were large bets placed on Tesla's stock ahead of public announcements. gains in the tens of millions. This is huge, Elizabeth thought. If she connected these trades to emails or calls between Jordan and Ava, it could be the smoking gun. And while Elizabeth had no intention of going to the feds on her own, Tesla's legal team could bury Ava, and by extension, Jordan's complicity, if he was involved. Elizabeth clutched her phone, anxiety coursing through her. She was walking a razor's edge. One false step, and Jordan might retaliate more fiercely, or Ava might strike. But a successful strike against Ava could free Elizabeth from this entire ordeal, giving her the leverage to secure a fair divorce settlement, or even land Jordan in deeper trouble, depending on his role. She reached for her phone to text Patricia when it buzzed in her hand. A call from an unknown number again. Tentatively, Elizabeth answered. A man's voice greeted her calm and steady. "Hello, Ms. Alberts. My name is Gregory Shaw. I'm part of CEO David Hartridge's legal counsel. He asked me to follow up regarding the situation with your husband." Elizabeth's heart skipped. Hartridge's legal counsel. "We understand from Mr. Hartridge's conversation with you that there might be unethical or even illegal behavior in play," Gregory continued. "The board is concerned about potential liability if Jordan's personal dealings spill into our corporate structure. We can't risk another scandal. Mr. Hartridge would like to assist you discreetly." Elizabeth exhaled slowly. She was on the cusp of powerful alliances forming against Jordan and Ava, but the more people got involved, the more dangerous it felt. Gregory concluded, "We'll be in touch with your lawyer. If you have any crucial evidence, Mr. Hartridge suggests you keep it secure. He wants to avoid a public meltdown, but he's prepared to do what's necessary to protect the company's interests, and that includes supporting you in your legal disputes, if it comes to that." Hanging up. Elizabeth felt a measure of validation. The cracks in Jordan's seemingly untouchable world were growing. Perhaps justice would prevail. Yet as she prepared to finalize the next round of documents for Michelle, a gnawing worry kept her awake at night. Cornered animals are the most dangerous, and Jordan, though once gentle and loving, had shown he could be ruthless when threatened. She braced herself for the storm that was surely coming. The next time Elizabeth saw Jordan in person, it wasn't by chance or a carefully arranged meeting. It was at the headquarters of Hartridge's conglomerate in Dallas. A sudden emergency board session had been called to address urgent corporate matters, and Elizabeth, having been notified by Gregory Shaw, arrived prepared. She walked into the reception area, her heart pounding with anticipation. Michelle Liu had insisted on accompanying her, but at the last minute she was called to handle a crucial filing. Elizabeth went alone, relying on the moral support from Gregory and the knowledge that Hartridge wanted the truth on record. Jordan was already inside the boardroom with Ava, who paced like a clad tiger. When Elizabeth entered, they both snapped their heads in her direction. Ava's glare could have sliced glass. Jordan's face was inscrutable, tense, angry, but also tinged with fear. Hartridge arrived moments later, trailed by a few board members and legal advisors. He wasted no time in stating the purpose of the meeting. "Allegations have come to my attention that Ms. Monroe has been engaging in stock trades leveraging proprietary information from Jordan's company and potentially from our own collaborations. We need to clarify the truth. Now." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Ava's jaw clenched. "This is preposterous," she began. "We demand to see your proof." Hartridge nodded to one of his advisors, who distributed printed documents, timelines of suspicious trades tied to accounts flagged by Tesla's legal team, along with correspondences that Elizabeth and Patricia had pieced together. Jordan snatched a packet from the advisor. His eyes swept over the page's color, draining from his face. Ava's lips thinned, and for a moment Elizabeth could see the faintest flicker of panic in her eyes. Hartridge pinned them with a stern gaze. "Jordan, you've been a valuable partner. I don't want to see your personal life derail your professional standing. But this is bigger than your marriage. Insider trading is a federal crime. And if Ms. Monroe is using your business resources to pull this off, you're implicated." Ava recovered quickly. She placed a hand on Jordan's arm, her voice smooth. "This is a misunderstanding, David. Anyone can align stock trades with corporate announcements. It's called speculation." Elizabeth decided enough was enough. She stood. "Speculation is one thing, but forwarding private emails, entire business proposals, and preliminary press releases is not speculation. I've seen the messages. You're literally discussing the best times to execute trades based on announcements that hadn't been made public yet." Ava whirled on Elizabeth. "You have no legal standing to claim that. You're just a scorned wife trying to sabotage Jordan and me." Elizabeth's blood boiled. "We'll let the evidence speak. There are even time-stamped emails from Jordan's corporate account sent to your personal email, Ms. Monroe, discussing upcoming expansions and product launches. Then trades were executed in your name or trusts linked to you within hours." A hush followed. Jordan's hands shook slightly. He seemed torn between denial and guilt. After all, the evidence was damning. If he denied it outright, he'd appear foolish. But if he admitted his involvement, he risked criminal charges and the wrath of the board. Hartridge leaned forward, his voice firm. "Jordan, I need answers. Were you aware of these trades?" Jordan stared at the table, words refusing to form. Finally, he managed, Ava said it was all above board, that it was just normal investing. Ava let out a short laugh, but it sounded hollow. "If you want to scapegoat me, Jordan, think carefully," she warned. "We made certain deals in your name as well. Your signatures are on plenty of documents." The entire boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Hartridge addressed one of his legal advisors. "Have we sent this to the SEC?" "Not yet," the advisor responded. "We wanted to confront them first." Jordan shot to his feet, panic etched on his face. "No need to escalate it. We can handle this internally. If I undo the trades, repay any gains, repay tens of millions of dollars," Hartridge asked. "And that would just be the tip of the iceberg if the SEC digs deeper. This is out of our hands if they launch a formal investigation." Elizabeth watched Jordan unravel. This was the man who had once been so composed, so unstoppable. Now he was cornered, sweat beading on his forehead. Ava, too, looked like a wild animal backed into a corner, eyes darting around the room. At that moment, a building security guard appeared at the door, knocking softly. "Mr. Hartridge, you asked for security on standby," he announced quietly. "Thank you," Hartridge replied, his tone like steel. "I believe we might need you." Ava's eyes flitted towards the door, then back to Hartridge. She adopted a pleading tone. "David, you know me. I've handled legal matters for some of the biggest players in the industry. I would never do anything to jeopardize your trust." Hartridge's face remained stony. "I trusted Jordan, not you. And this evidence suggests you're at the center of a major ethical breach. If you don't have a verifiable explanation for each of these trades and how you obtained insider information, I have no choice but to protect the company from liability." Suddenly, Jordan snapped. Fear twisted into anger, and he pointed a trembling finger at Elizabeth. "You did this. You ruined everything because you couldn't handle that I moved on." Elizabeth steadied her breathing, preparing to reply. But Hartridge cut in calm yet firm. "Don't blame her for your poor decisions. You let your personal affair become a corporate liability." Something in Jordan cracked. He lunged toward Elizabeth as if to grab her documents or her phone, an irrational move likely spurred by desperation. But he never made contact. In a blink, the security guard stepped forward and intercepted Jordan, gripping his arms. "Stand down, sir," the guard said, voice authoritative. Jordan struggled, but the guard was a solid wall of muscle. Ava shrieked. "Let him go." "This is a private matter." Hartridge shook his head, anger coloring his features. "You just attempted to assault someone in my boardroom. Security remove Mr. Alberts from the premises." Jordan's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't do that. I'm on the board." "Not anymore," Hartridge said grimly. "I can and I will. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. Once that concludes, we'll determine your status. Now go and take Ms. Monroe with you." A second guard stepped in, guiding Ava toward the door as she protested threatening lawsuits and defamation claims. But her words rang hollow, overshadowed by the looming specter of an SEC investigation. Elizabeth stood off to the side, stunned by how quickly it had escalated from a tension-filled meeting to an outright meltdown. As Jordan and Ava were led out, Jordan craned his neck to shout at her. "You'll pay for this, Elizabeth. Don't think you've won." But the threat carried little weight now. In that moment, Elizabeth felt the mixture of triumph and sorrow that comes with toppling a man she once loved. She hadn't wanted to see Jordan destroyed, only to protect herself and the life they had built together. But Jordan's actions and Ava's ambition had forced her hand. Hartridge dismissed the board members, soon after instructing his legal team to cooperate fully with any investigations. He turned to Elizabeth with a sympathetic frown. "I'm sorry you had to endure this, Miss Alberts. I assure you we'll handle it lawfully. Whatever personal or marital disputes remain, I hope you find closure." Elizabeth gave him a small nod. "Thank you. I appreciate your fairness." She gathered her documents and left the skyscraper, the bright Texas sun striking her face as she stepped onto the street. The entire drama replayed in her mind. He let his mistress cut off my cards, but the CEO called security on him. She thought a bitter yet satisfying sense of irony spreading in her chest. She wasn't naive enough to think it was over. Legal battles would continue, depositions would be taken, and the divorce was far from final. But in this pivotal moment, she had taken back her power, standing against the storm that Jordan and Ava had unleashed. And for the first time in months, Elizabeth felt a glimmer of hope that she might in the end be free from their tyranny. In the weeks that followed, word spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up on rumors of insider trading linked to a high-profile tech investor, hinting that a major name was under investigation. It didn't take long for the rumor mill to connect the dots to Jordan Alberts and his mysterious attorney-turned-partner, Ava Monroe. Elizabeth watched from the sidelines, inundated with calls and messages from acquaintances, reporters, and sometimes even old college classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. She ignored most of them, preferring to let the legal process unfold without adding fuel to the media frenzy. Jordan, under immense legal and financial pressure, attempted to strike a deal if Elizabeth agreed to keep quiet and not testify against him or Ava. Regarding insider trading, he would give her a generous divorce settlement. The settlement included alimony, a hefty lump sum, and properties that would secure her financial future. However, Elizabeth refused any agreement that required her to lie or withhold the truth if subpoenaed. Nonetheless, she allowed her lawyer Michelle to work out a fair settlement that didn't involve perjury. Eventually, Jordan capitulated, realizing he had to salvage what he could from the marriage and business meltdown. The final settlement granted Elizabeth a significant portion of the assets, the mansion by Lake Travis, ironically, and a sizable share of Jordan's original tech startup. Meanwhile, Ava disappeared from the public eye, her reputation in tatters. Rumors surfaced that she'd fled the country perhaps to avoid legal repercussions, while others suggested she was hiding out in some luxury villa, waiting for the storm to pass. Either way, her days of meddling in Jordan's finances seemed to be over. Elizabeth didn't celebrate Jordan's downfall. She quietly grieved the end of a marriage that had started in love and partnership, yet she also felt relief and a renewed sense of self. She returned to the Lake Travis mansion, deciding whether to keep it or sell. The sweeping views of the water brought back memories, some of which felt like knives to her heart, others that warmed her soul. She began a new chapter in her life, leveraging her PR skills to start a consultancy focused on helping women entrepreneurs navigate both business and personal challenges. She named it Phoenix Rose Consulting, symbolizing rebirth and resilience. To her surprise, she found more joy in championing other women than she ever did, standing behind Jordan at glitzy galas. She kept in touch with Patricia from Tesla, who occasionally updated her on the ongoing investigations. Whether Jordan faced criminal charges depended on further evidence. But at least for Elizabeth, the immediate threat to her assets and well-being had lifted. David Hartridge reached out, once inviting Elizabeth to a dinner with the board, presumably to mend fences. Elizabeth politely declined. She had no desire to relive the tension of board meetings or navigate corporate politics, where her personal life became public fodder. She was grateful for Hartridge's stance, but preferred to build her future away from the chaos. In moments of solitude, Elizabeth reflected on the entire ordeal. She'd once believed that love, loyalty, and shared ambition could conquer anything. Yet she also realized that unchecked power and ego could corrode even the strongest of bonds. Jordan's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it set her free to discover her own strengths and a life not tethered to someone else's rising star. Yes, heartbreak lingered, and healing was an ongoing process. But Elizabeth found herself waking each day with a sense of purpose. She'd gather with female founders at local co-working spaces, host workshops on media relations, and offer moral support to those feeling overshadowed by bigger players. Each time she saw a spark of confidence ignite in another woman's eyes, she felt her own sense of wholeness return. In time, Elizabeth would finalize the divorce, sign the deeds, and officially start over. A sense of calm settled within her, like the slow, tranquil waves on Lake Travis at dawn. Her story, the humiliating card cancellations, the public meltdown, the mistress's meddling, would become a cautionary tale, one she shared sparingly, only when it might help others. Despite the scars, Elizabeth refused to let bitterness define her. She chose growth empathy, and a belief that with the right support, anyone can rise from the ashes more formidable than before. Just as Elizabeth thought she had reached stable ground, fate tossed her another curveball. A month after the settlement, Michelle called her urgently. "The feds want to depose you," she said. "They uncovered new evidence Jordan may be involved in deeper crimes, bribery, money laundering. Ava might have orchestrated a network." Elizabeth's stomach dropped. Jordan never mentioned anything like that. They've found offshore transactions and documents with his signature, Michelle said grimly. 2 days later, Elizabeth sat in a stark federal office, flanked by Michelle and 2 serious agents. They questioned her about Jordan's finances, Ava's role, the card cancellations and philanthropic events that may have masked backdoor deals. Elizabeth stuck to the facts. She neither speculated nor dramatized. One agent, impressed, said, "You've been very helpful, Ms. Alberts. This case is significant." She left emotionally drained but relieved. She hadn't been dragged down with Jordan, but the storm wasn't over. Whispers followed Jordan was hiding at a secluded ranch, dodging the press. Ava had vanished. More subpoenas were issued. An indictment loomed. Elizabeth stayed focused on her consultancy, channeling stress into helping other women navigate business pitfalls. Her story, once painful, became a symbol of warning and strength. Then came the headlines: Jordan Alberts indicted for insider trading, fraud, and obstruction. Ava was named but still missing. The scandal rocked the tech world. Elizabeth issued a single statement. "I'm saddened by Jordan's choices. I've cooperated fully with authorities and continue to rebuild my life." Eventually, Jordan pled guilty to a lesser charge, offering a tearful courtroom apology. Elizabeth watched from home, tears in her eyes, not from triumph, but quiet grief for the man she once loved. Still, she understood consequences had to follow actions. That night, beneath the soft moonlight over Lake Travis, Elizabeth allowed herself one last cry for the past that died and the hope still waiting ahead. Life has a way of testing our fortitude when we least expect it. Elizabeth Alberts began this journey as a devoted wife, only to see her world upended by betrayal and financial sabotage. Yet what she lost in illusions, she gained in unbreakable resilience. Standing up to powerful forces and calling out wrongdoing isn't easy, but it's sometimes the only way to protect your dignity and your future. If you found this story gripping, insightful, or inspiring, we invite you to be a part of our community. Like this video, share it with friends who need a reminder that courage can emerge from chaos, and subscribe for more real-life drama and empowering tales. Let Elizabeth's story serve as a beacon, no matter how ruthless the betrayal. There's always a path to reclaim your power and build a brighter tomorrow. You too can rise like a phoenix.